Good afternoon and welcome to the Insight Teen Hour. My name is Frederick. I'm from Insight Treatment Programs here in Santa Clarita. We are a teen intensive outpatient program, or IOP and PHP program, here in the Valley. We treat teenagers who are struggling with mental health and/or drug and alcohol issues, and we are a family treatment program. So here on Mondays between 2 and 3 p.m. every Monday, we talk about issues related to teen mental health. On the show today, we are going to talk about sort of a very new and interesting piece of this. We don't offer this as part of our treatment program, but we're going to talk today about the subconscious mind and about how hypnosis can help us out in treatment. Sorry, Andrew, I hear a lot of echo on the line.
You should be good now.
Okay, I think we're back. Sorry for that little interruption. But yes, so today we're going to talk about how hypnosis and sort of the subconscious mind can help us change a bit of our paradigm. I feel that at Insight we have a lot of families where parents have sort of built up this idea that their kids needs to be supported or helped in certain ways, and the family dynamic can sometimes become a little complicated. And to change the paradigms in the family can be very important or necessary to get some different outcomes. And so today in the studio, I've invited Nikki Payne from Soul to Soul Healing in our community. And Nikki, welcome to the program.
Hi, Frederick. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, Nikki, let's first start with, sort of what brought you to this field and how come that you found sort of this big compassion for using hypnosis as part of treatment.
Yeah, my story is a little long-winded. I'll see if I can shorten it, but I grew up my journey started as a young child having self-esteem issues. I was a teenager. My parents broke up and split up, and I was engaging in not so good behaviors, got into drugs and alcohol at a very young age, marijuana in particular. And that carried with me in through college. And when I got to college, I found myself in an unhealthy relationship with someone who was also using drugs and more harder substances than I. And I realized during that time that I was kind of recreating the tumultuous relationship of my parents. And so that kind of led me on this healing journey after losing that person. I was a live-in college boyfriend, and he lost his life to heroin addiction, actually. And I lived with him for a couple years, and I watched him develop an addiction. I went through my phase and got hired at a reputable company where they did drug testing. So I got over it, but this person never got over it. And a year later, he actually died from his addiction. And that kind of led me to a spiral down in my 20s, kind of felt lost. I felt responsible for his death some way, somehow, and dealing with a lot of complicated emotions, numbing myself through marijuana, not wanting to kind of deal with life or adulting by any means, and kind of just been really into self-improvement, personal development. I was a dating writer for a while, so I used to interview dating experts, and I was just really obsessed with relationships and how to kind of change my own relationships, given that I had this ironic, because my last name is Payne, this association, this subconscious association that love equals pain. And so I just found myself in a series of relationships that were rocky, tumultuous, or with emotionally unavailable people. And one of these days, along my journey, I ended up going to some self-improvement class at this college in Tarzana, the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, where I kind of stumbled upon their classes and learned about the subconscious mind. And that's when it clicked for me that I had this old relationship programming stemming from my childhood and just witnessing how my parents were in relationship to each other. Because oftentimes our own parents are our first example of what it means to be in a relationship, our first model. And we don't know any different until we get older. And I realized that I was kind of stuck in this pattern of emotionally unavailable. And I realized I was emotionally unavailable as a result. And so I went to hypnotherapy school to learn about my subconscious programming. And I remember going through school, and I would always want to be the guinea pig. I was like, do me. I would always want them to practice on me. And at some point, during a class demonstration, I had this really profound experience where it was actually a biofeedback class. I specifically remember that we were learning about biofeedback. And so they hooked me up to these machines because they were trying to demonstrate how our thoughts literally change the flow of our energy in our brains, like our brain waves. It literally changes our brain waves. And so the example was, okay, think of a happy memory. And so I imagine like playing with a dog, and I can see on the screen how my brain waves are moving in a certain way. And then they asked me, the teacher asked me to think of a very difficult time in my life. And of course, the first thing I thought of was the biggest heartbreak of my life, losing someone to addiction. And then I saw my brainwaves kind of go all haywire from that experience. Mm-hmm. And of course, then he put me under into hypnosis after that demonstration, and he did this exercise with me. And I remember a memory came up in hypnosis. So he had me imagine, it was some kind of timeline therapy. It was a very long time ago, so I don't remember too much. But I do remember having a distinct memory, a childhood memory. And I didn't even know if it was real or not, because hypnosis can sometimes produce false memories. We sign waivers on that when we become a hypnotherapy client. So I wasn't sure if it really happened. And so, of course, I did my homework and I asked my family members that were in the hypnosis experience. And my parents actually confirmed that it actually did happen. And I was like, what?
Wow.
And it just blew my mind. And that whole experience basically had me float above the experience of me as a child. And I got to see things from a different perspective from my adult self. And like, what did I need to learn at that time that I didn't know? And the lesson that I got, because oftentimes as kids, we have a tendency, I think, to put our parents on a pedestal. And so I was in a situation with my parents where, why do I have to be the adult in this relationship? Why can't I just be a kid? And then kind of seeing it from a different perspective, realizing that my parents are human. And at that time in their life, they were doing the best they could at that time in my life. They didn't mean to harm me. They didn't mean to hurt me. They just literally didn't know what to do in that situation, because I kept running out of the house every time they tried to leave. I was a latchkey kid. And so that experience, I talked to my parents about that. And I remember at that point, I hadn't talked to my mom in 2 years. I had a very toxic relationship with my mother. We would say horrible, mean things to each other back and forth. And I just crushed my self-esteem, the things that she would say to me. And so I cut her off completely. And during that time in hypnosis school, my mom always kept reaching out, and I would just keep ignoring her. And I remember I wanted to be ready to see her. I wanted to build my self-esteem so much that when I saw her, nothing that she could say could perturb me. And when I finally had the courage to actually see her, I had new language to be able to talk to my mom in a whole new way, and didn't realize until that whole hypnosis experience that there were some cultural differences in the way we viewed respect and just certain values that really shaped my childhood experience, because she was instilling Asian values in me, and my father instilled American values in me. And so there was a lot of cultural conflict between us, and being able to kind of understand how she was interpreting things that she was, her parents said to her when she was growing up, and the translation, just realized it was whole miscommunication, misunderstanding, and being able to just check in and like, hey, when you said this, did you mean this? Because that's how I'm interpreting it. And that's when my mom would say, no, that's not what I mean. And so then I started learning using hypnosis, how to juxtapose it, how to like recognize my mom has good intentions. This is just how it shows up. And I had to do my own inner work of, how of translating her talk into a more positive way. And now I have the best relationship of my life with my mother. I never thought in a million years that I would get to this place with her. And so that's kind of how I fell into this industry. I mean, I know it was a long-winded story. Does that answer your question?
It's a great story, Nikki. And I just don't think I can stress enough how important it is to have therapists and counselors in our industry that has their own experience, right? That has experienced something that makes them really be passionate about certain approaches or, I think that is extremely important for us to have. So thanks for sharing, Nikki. I think that's a big part of it. And then, and also, sorry, just to follow up, I really feel that what you're describing is this shift in paradigm, right, for you,
Absolutely.
this shift in the way of your thinking. And I think you're right. It is really important that we find a way, however that way, whatever it is that works for us, but that teens and young adults tries different ways, tries different approaches to elevate themselves up and look at whatever's going on from a different perspective, right? And whether it's hypnosis or whether it's through a regular process or whether it's through meditation or mindfulness, but that we give the teens an opportunity to sort of try and remove themselves from the day-to-day arguing and fighting and lift themselves up into a bigger perspective and look at what goes on, right? So they can change their paradigm of how they're looking at their parents and not just put them on a pedestal, as you're saying, or expect that they can't handle it if they tell the truth about how they feel or what they're going through, right? So, but before I think obviously in this show today, we're going to talk a little bit about, what is hypnosis. You're going to explain to us what it is and how it works. We're also going to talk a bit about the misconceptions maybe in this area. I'm sure you're running into a lot of those. And we're going to talk about the different diagnoses or the different disorders that people are having that you're working with, right, where you are using hypnosis as part of the treatment model. So we have a long list of things that we're going to go through today. But let's start with, obviously, what is hypnosis? How would you describe hypnosis to the parents that are listening out there?
Yeah, for people who are unfamiliar with hypnosis, I often liken it to a guided meditation. Meditation is something that it's more socially accepted. People have a better understanding of what it is. So when I liken it to guided meditation and they actually experience it, they're like, oh, that is a lot like meditation. And really what it is just creating a safe space where we're physically relaxing the body so that the mind can relax a little bit more, just creating that safe, supportive environment that and getting someone so safe that the critical filter within their mind kind of goes to sleep. Because when our critical filter is on, our logic, our critical thinking skills kick in, our logic, our reasoning, our decision making, and it loses when we're in that space. We're not easily accessing our subconscious, and so we put the critical filter to sleep for a little while, or take a little nap, as I like to say, so that we can actually plant suggestions into the subconscious mind, because the subconscious doesn't know the difference between fact or fiction. All it responds to is the images, the symbols, and the words of the mind. And hypnosis is a really great way to really help someone process what's going on through imagination, through creative visualization in the safety of their subconscious mind. Because sometimes it can be difficult to process certain emotions, but when we use metaphors and imagination and images in the mind, it's a lot easier and safer to process those emotions from a distance, all in the safety of the subconscious mind.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, it's a natural, normal state we experience every day. It's no different than getting lost in a good movie or lost in a good book. The writer, the author, the director, they're effectively using images, sounds, words to entrance you into the story. And it's when you get lost in your own thoughts. It's when you get lost in daydreams. Those are all forms, of hypnosis to some degree. There's environmental hypnosis when we're stuck in a lot of traffic or we're at a loud concert and we have all these stimuli going on. There's internal our internal environment. So all the thoughts that we have, especially if we're thinking negatively, that we put ourselves into this hyper-suggestible state where we're kind of taking in those negative criticisms, those negative self-appraisals as truth. And a best way to explain it that people understand what it feels like, have you ever driven on the freeway and missed your exit?
Yes, Absolutely.
Because your mind drifted off to something completely unrelated. Yeah, that is a form of environmental hypnosis. Have you ever wondered, like, how did I get home and not crash my car? And
yes.
that's because, and that is because what happens is when you're in hypnotic sleep, your subconscious is running the show. You already know how to drive. Your subconscious is already programmed to drive. It knows the way home. It knows how to get to where it needs to go safely, allowing your mind to wander wherever it will without putting you into a dangerous situation. It's very different than deep sleep, like when you're sleeping at night, because what happens at night when you're actually sleeping in your own bed is this phenomenon happens in the body where you go into what's called a sleep paralysis. And that's so that you can experience the depth of your emotions and the safety of your mind without kicking your partner or without sleepwalking or without bringing harm to anyone or to yourself. So that's why it's very different than sleep. Hypnotic sleep and sleeping sleep is a lot different.
Well, unfortunately, Nikki, we need to go into a quick little break here. But when we come back, I would love to hear more about, how does it work? Do people need to practice if they show up at Soul to Soul Healing and they want to try this out as part of their treatment? What kind of preparation needs to be done, or how long do they maybe have to train before they can actually utilize it, if any time at all? But we'll go into a quick little break. You're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this is the Insight Teen Hour, and we'll be back in a few minutes with Nikki Payne, who's telling us about hypnosis and the subconscious mind. Good. Welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. This is the second half, and in the studio today, we got Nikki Payne from Soul to Soul Healing, who is telling us about the subconscious mind and about how she can use hypnosis, or how she is using hypnosis as part of treatment for families. Welcome to the show, Nikki.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Of course. So, Nikki, we were talking a little bit about what hypnosis actually is, but can you tell us a little bit more about how it works? Like, if a parent would show up at your facility, or at your door, at your program, how would it work? How much practice does it take? And how many sessions do you typically do? Like, how does it work in practice?
Yeah, in practice, it really depends, because there's two different types of hypnosis. There's heterohypnosis, which is the practice of someone else putting you into hypnosis, which is what I do when a client comes into treatment. Or there's self-hypnosis, which is something that I can teach others to do. I generally recommend starting off with heterohypnosis so they can kind of get familiar with the feeling of hypnosis. And then I start teaching them self-hypnosis. And treatment times can vary. The idea behind hypnosis is that it's generally a short-term therapy to create lasting changes. I'd say the average person comes to me for anywhere from 6 to 12 sessions, depending how deep-rooted the issue is.
Great. I mean, that gives us a bit of an idea, right, of how long does this take. And then another thing I'm curious about is sort of the misconceptions around hypnosis. I'm sure you run into a lot of people having a lot of different opinions or thoughts about what it really is. What are some of the more typical ones that you run into? What do you typically have to say again and again and again as you are presenting as you're presenting hypnosis to them as part of treatment?
A common misconception that people usually have comes from stage hypnosis, where they think I'm going to make them do something embarrassing, or I'm going to make them quack like a duck or bark like a dog or anything like that. And so, there's a fear that they're going to not have control, especially because they see people do these ridiculous things on these stage hypnosis shows. And I always tell people, well, first I kind of have a sense of humor, and I ask them, do you want to bark like a dog? And I always get a laugh out of them. And I tell them I don't do stage hypnosis. What I do is more therapeutic in nature. And I always assure them that they have 100% control of their experience. So there is no loss of control. And I let them know that if the fire alarm goes off, their survival instincts are going to kick in, and they're instantly going to snap out of it, which leads me to another conception that people can sometimes get stuck in hypnosis. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Office Space. The premise behind that movie is the character is in a hypnosis session and the hypnotist dies in the middle of the session. And so that whole movie is about him having this I don't give a crap attitude, and he's stuck in that state of mind. You can't get stuck in hypnosis. Like I mentioned, your survival instincts kick in. Another common conception that people have, especially after their first time with hypnosis, they'll say, oh, I wasn't hypnotized. I heard every word that you said. And when you're in hypnosis, there's different levels to experience hypnosis, different levels of depth. There's like a light stage of hypnosis where some people hear every word that is being said. And, some people have described it as being like an in-between space where you're here, but you're also somewhere else at the same time and kind of 1 feet in both worlds. For other people, they might remember half of what was said, and then the other half, they kind of got lost in their own mind with the images or the suggestions. And then some people have complete somnambulism where they don't remember anything. And there's no right or wrong way to experience it. However way people experience it is exactly how they need to experience it. Some people are so suggestible. I could say there's laughing gas seeping through the windowsills and they'll start laughing hysterically. But for others, like doctors and lawyer types or people that are more overthinkers and analytical, for them it's more of a thinking process. Some people get results in as few as a day to a week, and others who have more delayed processing, they'll see the results after a couple weeks. I'm one of those people personally where it takes a couple weeks for the suggestions to kick in. So those are some of the common misconceptions that I deal with.
Mm-hmm. Now, that brings me to another question, which is, obviously at Insight, in an intensive outpatient program, we have a lot of families where the teen often they don't want treatment, right? They want to be left alone. They don't think it's working. They might have seen an individual therapist before, and they've sort of given up on the idea that this will ever change, whatever they're struggling with, right? So often we talk to parents about, the teens, they don't need to want treatment to actually get treatment. They don't need to want to do this to actually get something out of it. But how is that when it comes to hypnosis and sort of the idea that, hey, you need to do something, or, hey, it's not just you, and they keep, putting people into sleep, and boom, then the kid is gone or the teen is gone. What do you feel? What would you say to parents or when they would say, well, my teen is not really up for any change. They don't want to look into it. They don't want to deal with this. Is it still possible to do, or, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I often tell people when I'm working with clients that, you can come in as skeptical as you want to be, but I only need 2 criteria. Number 1, an open mind, and the fact that someone sitting in front of me indicates that they have an open mind. And then the second thing is a strong desire for change. And I let people know if there's no desire for change, it's probably not going to be as effective. So I'm really good at managing people's expectations from the very beginning. And usually when I manage those expectations from the very beginning, they tend to get quicker results as opposed to people that have these high unrealistic expectations and they don't get the results they're looking for because it wasn't being managed. But in the case of like a teen that's not ready for change, honestly, I can't say that I've worked with anyone who hasn't been ready for change. Most of the teens that I work with, they want something to change, but traditional forms of therapy haven't been worked for them. So they actually get really excited at a new modality and a new opportunity. And I kind of position it I always liken it to like all of our subconscious programs are like apps on their phone, because a lot of them have phones. Some of them have different apps on their phone. And just like different apps on our phone have different programs, there's also programs in our subconscious mind. Even like we have a program even for how to put our pants on. If we put it left leg first or right leg first. And we don't even think about it. It's just so ingrained in our subconscious. So I always kind of give them the power of choice. Like I always ask them, would you like to have more power and control in your life? And they always say yes. And then I ask them if we can update a program in your subconscious or an app. If you had an app in your brain that you'd like to update, what would that program be? And I've literally had some of these teenagers tell me, I wish I could get my ADHD away, or I wish I could heal this trauma. And most of the ones I use are like for behavioral issues related to attention deficit disorder. And so they say, I want to remove that. And so then it's processing their thoughts and feelings about having that label or that diagnosis. Because I also explain as a hypnotherapist, I'm kind of a belief enhancement and modification specialist, behavior modification and belief enhancer. And because a lot of our habits are ingrained in how we think and believe about ourselves. And so what I use with hypnosis is I kind of help explore their strengths, what they're good at, their values, and kind of make those, help them use their habits and behaviors to strengthen those beliefs about themselves. Because a lot of times, these positive things they have about themselves, those self-appraisals, are very, very small. And so I work with them to kind of create more evidence that their subconscious mind can latch onto, so that it strengthens their belief within themselves and they see themselves as someone that can change. Because a lot of times there's that belief, I'm never going to change, it's never going to work for me, and kind of just working with them where they're at and then guiding them to where they want to go. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And it also makes me what I hear you say is that hypnosis is not just for a certain disorder, right? It's you're dealing with probably a broad spectrum of different teens and adults coming in with everything from anxiety to trauma to sleep disorders or OCD. Isn't that correct? Or would you say it's specified on a couple of different disorders?
No, absolutely. I see a broad range of different disorders, and I think it's definitely impactful, particularly with anything that has to do with habit. Even like anxiety disorders, it's a habit of thought, helping them transition that. Or even with addiction, kind of helping them increase awareness of their feelings, how they're coping, and whatever their triggers are, using hypnosis to disassociate or desensitize them from those triggers so it doesn't have the same impact that maybe it once did. So it's really about altering and changing those associations in their subconscious mind so that they have a different reaction or different behavior than they once had before.
Makes sense. And that's why I keep falling back to the whole idea about the family system, right? And how parents sometimes really need to have that shift in paradigm. Again, this shift in the way that they're looking at the family or looking at the teens. And I just feel it could be so helpful for a lot of parents to try and go through a process like that to see if they could, because they often have this, they sometimes come in and say things like, yeah, my teen is so, he's so defiant, or he's so lazy, or, he just want to do anything. He just wants to hurt me. He just wants to say things that are hurtful. And sometimes it really is hard to change that paradigm because it's been going on for so long, right? And the parents see it from a certain angle, and they don't necessarily see it from a sort of more productive perspective, where we can see some progress, right? Where people can start finding each other and building up their relationship again. So
definitely, and with some parents, that I've worked with, it's really about tapping into their inner child, because a lot of times what's coming up with their teen is triggering their own teen issues from their past, and it's like they're not even aware of it. And so sometimes doing inner child work with the parent can help them kind of shift their attitude towards their child and have a little bit more compassion, or be a little bit more stern if they need to be, depending on the context of the situation.
Yes, absolutely. Helping them set boundaries, right? And helping them sort of be okay with saying no, and helping them with some of the shame or some of the guilt that they are walking around with from some of the things that happened to them, right, in their earlier stage of their life. To tap into some of that and really make that relevant to what they're struggling right now and how hard it is to be a parent right now, and some of the dynamics that are going on in the family system right now, I think can be very, very helpful for parents.
Absolutely. It's something I've been experimenting with. I haven't done it yet, but something I've been playing around with the idea of is doing a group hypnosis within the family system, and then being able to process the different images that came up, because just like in couples therapy, you want to understand each other's love map, so to speak. I think that if everyone in the family system can really understand each other's inner psyche a little bit more, we can have a lot more compassion towards each other, towards one another, and improve the communication as well, because we're understanding where we're each coming from.
Absolutely. I'm thinking on that note, Nikki, have you ever tried to have, for instance, parents one at a time maybe process a certain event that took place in the family unit or in the family system, and then, of course, have the team process it as well, and then see what different stories that they come up with, different perspectives that they come up with. Have you ever tried that? I was just curious.
No, I haven't, but this is stuff I think about of like, I want to try it because I often wonder about this because it does help facilitate the paradigm shift.
Exactly. And you then can, of course, work with them, outside of the, work with them in normal process or DBT or whatever, but work with them with different modalities, knowing their different perspective on a certain incident that has taken place. But that brings me to my next question, Nikki. What you use, of course, hypnosis in conjunction with traditional counseling or therapy modalities, right? How does that work? So typically families would come in or a parent would come in maybe for one hypnosis session, and then in the same week or straight afterwards they would do some sort of process work, or how does that look like?
I actually do it within the session. So depending on need, I generally like maybe the first half of the session will be a cognitive processing of stuff, and then the last maybe 10 to 20 minutes of the session, we reinforce all the cognitive learnings, the takeaways, and reinforce it into the subconscious mind through hypnosis. Because a lot of times what I often find is that sometimes we have these big realizations in therapy, just with traditional talk therapy, but without a process for kind of instilling it within us, embodying it, like it just deepens the learning on a visceral experience. When people can go into hypnosis and embody that learning or see images to kind of create these new neuro pathways in the brain to make it stick a lot longer lasting than mere positive thinking or just thinking about it versus really embedding it into the subconscious mind through hypnosis.
Interesting. Got it. Well, I'm afraid we have to go into a quick little break again, Nikki. But we will be back in a few minutes. After a little break. You're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this is Frederick Schulin from Insight Treatment and Nikki Payne from Soul to Soul Healing. Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. You're listening to Frederick here from Insight Treatment and Nikki Payne from Soul to Soul Healing. We are talking about how we sometimes can utilize hypnosis in treatment and how it can help us sort of elevate our perspective and change our paradigm and our look at the current crisis a bit, and improve our relationships and help us with diagnoses such as anxiety or depression or trauma, even sleep issues. So, Nikki, we only have like 10 minutes left or so, but tell me a little bit about. So again, curious about the families that you're working with. What is a typical sort of situation that they're in when they will reach out to you?
Yeah, a typical situation that I deal with generally has to do with some form of trauma, whether it was child abuse or some kind of sexual assault. And there's some self-harm involved in that as well. And so a lot of times these individuals have gone through some kind of residential or intensive outpatient program. And when they graduate from that program, they'll come see me for continuation of services. And generally there's anxiety, definitely lots of anxiety, depression, and trauma. They kind of all go hand in hand as well. And then there's also trust issues as a result because they're dealing with some, past experiences of sexual assault. So
and
PTSD,
do you typically
that kind of thing?
Oh, sorry, I interrupted you, Nikki. Please say again.
Oh no, I was just I also added PTSD also.
And do you typically treat them in person? I know your program Soul to Soul Healing is down in the South Bay, but but you also do a lot of telehealth. Is it typically something you can do through Zoom, or do you need to see people in person? What is your preference there, or how does that usually work?
Yeah, ever since the pandemic started or during that time, I remember a lot of people thought, oh, it's not as effective. But what I found during those couple years where we were kind of living at home for most of us and working from home is that it's just as effective as in-person hypnotherapy. I've actually worked with people, even just telephone. I've never seen them in person, just through their voice, and they still get some profound changes. It does turn out to be a preference for many people. Lots of people prefer the in-person session, so I was probably among the first in my neck of the world to start seeing people in person. And so, but I prefer like meeting that first session to be in person, so that we're building that rapport and they really get a sense. And there's just things that you can vibe with a person in person and that you can't really pick up on through telehealth. And once that rapport is established in person, what a lot of people find is they end up wanting to switch to telehealth because it's a lot more convenient, or sometimes they want to just trade off and go back and forth.
Makes sense. And when you do telehealth, if you want to include hypnosis, do you then ask for the person to put on headphones and sit in their bed and relax, and then you go through some, or is it just in front of the actual computer, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a preference. Again, some people like to just sit up in front of their computer, kind of like take a meditative state where they just put their feet flat on the floor and hands on their lap. Other people want to get nice and comfortable. I generally recommend that they don't do it in the same place where they sleep, so that we're not creating new associations with the bed beyond just sleeping. We want the bed just to be for sleeping versus hypnosis. So I always recommend they find a recliner or a couch where they can relax and recline, but some people do like to sit up and do it. So it's really a personal preference for many. Most people like to lay down somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I do recommend headphones, because it does make the sounds more clear and crisp than if they were just hearing it from the screen.
Absolutely. Is things like this, is it paid through insurance? I mean, I know in your practice, of course, you guys take insurance as payment, but does that also cover hypnosis? And when you do the work around hypnosis, or would that be private pay, sort of out-of-pocket expense?
Yeah, as long as the therapist is a licensed or pre-licensed provider, like registered with the Board of Behavioral Sciences, there is a CPC code associated with psychotherapy with hypnotic interventions. But if you're seeing a hypnotherapist that doesn't have any credentials as a psychotherapist, you might have a harder time getting coverage. Because in the state of California, hypnotherapists don't have to be licensed professional. Their scope of practice includes general self-improvement, and per the Business and Professions Code, they would have to, if they're unlicensed, that they would have to have a referral from a licensed professional if there's issues beyond self-improvement. So say someone has a cancer treatment and they want to get rid of symptoms, or help use hypnosis for symptom management, or if they're with addiction, for instance, it's definitely highly recommended and advised having a medical doctor on staff, just so we can monitor or consult with a doctor if we're noticing any withdrawal symptoms that are at play. So it really depends on the provider that's providing the services, but there is a CPC code. At Soul to Soul, we actually don't take insurance, not yet. Cross our fingers that we can soon at some point. But we do provide super bills. And so what I've had a lot of people do is they ask for super bills every month so that they can submit it directly to their insurance company for reimbursement. And it varies from insurance company to insurance company, of course.
Yeah, and that usually works too. I will say a lot of parents report back that, hey, that's not a problem. They just, of course, have to fork out the money in the beginning, but they usually get paid by insurance, even if they submit the super bill. What I was sorry, I just forgot here for a second what I was going to ask you about. Okay. Well, I know that, Soul to Soul Healing has a lot of you guys are dealing with a lot of different things in your practice. What else can you tell us about the practice? What other sort of things besides hypnosis and regular psychology or process groups do you guys offer?
Yeah, so we offer individual counseling for adolescents and teens. We work with young adults as well. We also work with couples and families. We also have a teen program that we're preparing to launch. It's a Tuesday and Thursday program where one day is like a process group for teens to kind of just talk about being a teenager and different, bullying, anxiety, self-esteem, different topics related to teens to help them process. And then we have the second portion of that program is a mindfulness training to kind of help them build those skills of mindfulness, because we think that's just like a really foundational key coping skill that people can learn. And then another component for part of the program is once a month family therapy, so that the teen is also getting support with the rest of the family too, and the family can support the teen in their recovery as well. And we're also, something I'm kind of preparing on the back burner, like a pet project of mine, is actually developing a self-esteem support group specifically for young adults. I do some volunteer work with the college sorority as an advisor, and a theme I'm coming up across a lot, especially with young student leaders, is self-esteem issues. And so I'm creating a program, like an 8-week process group, that talks about pillars of self-esteem from self-esteem expert Nathaniel Brandon, and incorporating DBT skills as well. So that's something that I have in development right now that I'm really excited to launch in 2023.
Wow, that's great. That is definitely needed, no doubt about it. So we can't get enough of that. There are so many young people that are struggling right now. And now I remember what I was going to ask you before. So if you're looking for a certified a clinician who can work with you on hypnosis, what would you look for? What are the credentials? How does it look like?
Yeah, so what you'll see is a lot of people that are certified hypnotherapists. You'll look for a CHT, is what it stands for, clinical hypnotherapist or certified hypnotherapist. If you go to a website called hypnosis.edu, they have a directory where you can look for all the graduates from that college that have the credentials of hypnotherapy. That's a good resource where you type in your zip code to find a hypnotherapist near you. That's what you would look for. And if you're looking for someone that, preferably, because I have had situations where someone wants a trained, like a licensed therapist who does hypnosis. So that one's a little bit harder to find, but I would recommend going on a website like Psychology Today, where you can filter clinicians based on their modalities and through your zip code to find a clinician that way too that does both.
Mm-hmm. And if somebody out there would be interested in learning more, I know you mentioned a few websites to me, but is there any websites that you would recommend people to go to if they wanted to learn the difference, for instance, between hypnosis and mindfulness, or just in general, just some important facts or important things about hypnosis?
Yeah, so hypnosis.edu it's the first accredited college on hypnotherapy. So they have something called Hypnosis TV, where you can just get sucked into a wormhole learning about hypnosis. And of course, I wrote on my personal website, hypnodipity.com. It's a combination of hypnosis and serendipity combined to make my own word, hypnodipity. And on that website, yeah, because that's the magic that I create. I was trying to think, like, what is it that I really create for people? And it's hypnodipity. When people come back and, like, you'll never guess what happened. And it's always something serendipitous. And so I always describe what I do as, like, it's the magic that unfolds when you combine hypnosis with serendipity when they come together. And so I actually wrote this really good blog post, because a common question that always comes up is, what's the difference between mindfulness, meditation, and hypnosis? So I actually talk about that in the blog post and kind of relate to it in terms of, like, mindfulness is like a mental habit, is like strength training. Meditation is like cardio, like mental exercise, and hypnosis is actually like the CrossFit of mental conditioning. And so there's a really good blog post there.
Yes. And if somebody is seeing a therapist, let's say a local therapist on the side, and they've done that for a while, and they want to explore hypnosis, what do you say if they call and say, hey, look, I already have a therapist, but I really want to explore this piece of it, or add that to it. I have maybe a therapist that's very focused on somatic experience, or on DBT, or something else. How would you usually address that? Would you say, sorry, but come to me when you're done with your existing therapist, because we can't have too many chefs in the kitchen? Or what is your recommendation?
Yeah,
there?
I actually work really well in conjunction with other providers. So it's kind of no different than if you had a primary therapist and you wanted to go see someone else for EMDR. Same thing goes here if you want to see someone for hypnosis. What I would generally ask them is if they'd be willing for me to consult with their primary therapist so I can kind of get a feel on what they're working on. Because, of course, I don't want to step on the toes of the primary therapist. I want to understand what they're working on and actually reinforce what the primary therapist is doing to improve their overall treatment outcomes as the primary therapist. And I just embed it in the subconscious mind with hypnosis.
Got it. Great. Well, unfortunately, the program is coming to an end. This hour goes so fast every week. But thank you very much for coming in today, Nikki. Thank you for giving us all this good advice and explaining to us about hypnosis. I truly wish that hypnosis was part of the program at Insight up here in Santa Clarita. I think families could really benefit from it. But at this point, it's not. So at least it's good for us to get this information and get it out there in our community.
Definitely.
Yeah. Nikki, just here in the end, how can people reach you if somebody out there wants to get hold of you, or what would you recommend? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out by finding me on soul2soultherapy.com. It's soul, like two souls connecting, soul, the number 2 soultherapy.com. And you can reach out to me through there. My email address is also Nikki, Niki, at soul2soultherapy.com.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Nikki, and all the best. And I'm sure I'll talk to you soon in different sorts of ways. But
yes,
thank you for being on the show today. And say hi to all to Lisa and all the coworkers down there at Soul to Soul.
Will do. Thank you, Frederick. It was nice connecting with you today and sharing this info.
Likewise. Okay. You were listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this was the Insight Teen Hour. I'll see you again next Monday from 2 to 3 p.m.